I'm going to get started, and for all of you who are online right now joining us, thank you for coming to our Heritage Village Speaking of History virtual series. We wanted to bring you some virtual content due to the pandemic, and we haven't been able to have our regular Speaking of History series in person for how many months is it now? I don't even know anymore. So I'm so happy to introduce tonight Bill DeYoung, who is a Catalyst senior writer and editor. Excuse me, Catalyst senior writer and editor. Bill DeYoung was a St. Petersburg Times correspondent at the age of 17. He went on to a 30-year career at newspapers in Florida and Georgia. He is the author of Skyway, the true story of Tampa Bay's signature bridge and the man who brought it down, Phil Gernhard, Record Man, I Need to Know, the Lost Music Interviews, and Vintage St. Pete, the Golden Age of Tourism, and more. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Monica, thanks for having me tonight. It's the first time I've talked about this new project, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Me too.
Well, that makes two of us. I can't see how many folks are out there, but thanks for joining us tonight. Well, let me start by saying that I am a native of St. Petersburg. Born and raised. I was born here in 1958, as a matter of fact. And if you do the math, you can figure out my age. But a lot of pride in my city and a lot of great memories of growing up in this town, which has changed so very much, as we all know. I spent a lot of years away from here, raised a family in another city in Florida while I was working as a journalist. But a few years ago, came back only to find that St. Petersburg had an arts community, which it never had really before. And still a wonderful, warm place full of great people. And the memories were still here, which brings me to this book, which is called Vintage St. Pete, the Golden Age of Tourism and More. I'm a writer with the St. Pete Catalyst these days. And about 2 years ago, I think it was, I started, there were questions I wanted answered really about my hometown. There were things that I knew had happened or places I'd been as a kid. I'm a baby boomer, right? That I was curious about. Whatever happened to these places? What was the real story there? I remembered the Boyd Hill Nature Trail really, really well. And I discovered, of course, that the Boyd Hill Preserve is still here, but the nature trail's gone. And it took me a while to find somebody who remembered it as well as I did and maybe worked there or had worked there and could talk with me about it. And as a journalist, what you want to do is write all these things down and create some sort of narrative. Long story short, it became a series that I wrote for the Catalyst about places and people and things in my hometown that I remembered, and I think that a lot of other people remembered, of my generation, again, baby boomers, that didn't seem to be in history books. When you read about the history of St. Petersburg, you're going to read a lot about people named Straub and Roser and Demons and the founders of this city, and it's wonderful stuff. As a young person growing up, I appreciated that. I wanted to go see the dolphins at the Aquatarium. I wanted to go hang out at the Wax Museum and the weird, freaky Chamber of Horrors there. All these things I remembered, and they were all gone. And what I found was there was very little had been written about them. Okay, you could go online, you could find out some things, see a few pictures. A lot of it was people's opinions, a lot of it was memories like mine. Again, as a journalist, that makes you want to dig into it more. And once I realized that there were other folks like me, perhaps of my age group, who were out there and had the same memories, I found a niche, let's put it that way. And so to date, it's been about 2 years now, I've written somewhere around 40 of these vintage St. Pete stories, which we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We collected 22 of them. It's almost completely the first 22 in this book. Now the book has just gone to the printers. We're hoping very, very much that it'll be available by Christmas time. We're going to start taking pre-orders really soon. It's a hardcover book. It's in full color. Most of the photographs are in color. A lot of the historical ones you'll discover aren't available in color. So I thought what we do tonight is just take a little magical mystery tour, if you will, through what's in the book and what we can hopefully look forward to and talk about a little bit. So I'm going to start here and see you soon.
At the Aquatarium, porpoises put on a dazzling, colorful, splashing show of leaping antics. A visit to this attraction is a look into the wondrous world of sea animals. Leaps of 20 feet and higher are common for the high-flying porpoise. Watch him as he flips through the air with the greatest of ease. An added feature of the daily show is a performing whale. The porpoise, the whale, the turtle, the stingray, and thousands of other marine creatures live at the Aquatarium as they do in the watery deep. Not to be outdone, the great whale in a whale of a show. Performing sea lions are a daily feature here too. We find them in another tank at the Aquatarium. Catching rings, a clever trick for our frisky friends of the water. A trained porpoise welcomes everyone to our aquatic performance. Like the old adage, every dog has his day. Not all the show is looked on from topside. Through many picture windows, you can enjoy a view of the marine animal at play. Feeding time, an added treat. A diver plays with a group of porpoises between acts of the main show. The Aquatarium, with over 2,000 varieties of marine life. And no trip to St. Petersburg is complete without a visit to the marine wonderland. From the thrilling underwater world to a South Sea island paradise on the west coast of Florida, beautiful and exotic tiki gardens. Every feature of Polynesian life is carried over at this attraction. You are treated at every turn to beautiful, colorful gardens, winding jungle trails, wayside pools, and hundreds of birds in the parakeet bell tower. Figures of Polynesian gods adorn the area. And all are invited to see the temple of Kontiki and Oro, the two-faced god. The authentic Polynesian atmosphere is everywhere, from the thatched island hut to the native canoe pulled up on the inviting white beaches. At Tiki Gardens, you'll want to admire the view from atop Fire Mountain, or maybe linger in the cool afternoon shade of one of many fragrant gardens. Colorful peacocks are free to roam the island, and they join in the nightly torchlighting show. And don't forget the unique island fashions, the mementos and novelties at Tiki Gardens. enchanted land of Florida. The cool, forest-like areas of sunken gardens offers the hint of romance of yet another world. Delicate pink flamingos are reflected in shady pools throughout the gardens and offer a complementary note of breathtaking color to the picture. Located near downtown St. Petersburg, Sunken Gardens is proud of more than half a century of tropical beauty with 5,000 varieties of vegetation and flowers. Flowers of every description from all corners of the world. Truly fine is the pipe organ cactus. More than 250,000 people come every year to view what is indeed a rare exhibit of nature. And nature provides a brilliant theater for the bird, the plant life, the vegetation. A wonder to behold, acclaimed long ago by millions as a major attraction of our time. Sunken Gardens is proud, too, of the towering royal palms, a powerful background for the delicate enchantment of flowers and blooms. The new addition to the gardens is the aviary, a unique sanctuary in itself where one may walk among exotic and native birds of every color on the rainbow. Sunken Gardens, like a dream, formed and created by man, equaling the eternal beauty and mystery of nature. Travel through the dimension of time at the London Wax Museum. London's Big Ben is the landmark for Josephine Tussaud's noted collection of waxed art. Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. Three great men, framers of the Declaration of Independence. A landmark in time, the signing of the Confederacy. The immortal Robert E. Lee. Lincoln's deathbed scene is truly a monument to realism, for the museum has actually recreated Lincoln's final breaths of life during his last moments on Earth. A scene so real, you are transported back into time. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Winston Churchill. Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt. And America's best-known storyteller, Mark Twain. Royalty, of course. Prince Rainier and his lovely wife. Need we say more? In elegant regal attire, the Tussaud collection portrays Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. And if you are one with a thirst for adventure, there's a page in history for the pirates and their plunder, both here and abroad. The pirate and his loot. However, the pirate might be more at home at the next St. Petersburg attraction, the HMS Bounty. Known throughout the world, this famed vessel has inspired novels, legends, and the full-length MGM motion picture production, Mutiny on the Bounty. The Bounty traveled more than 50,000 miles around the globe on a worldwide promotion tour, all under sail, and now lies at anchor in the St. Petersburg harbor. Built to firm standards, the Bounty of today is a replica of the original, skippered by the notorious pirate Captain Bligh. It's great fun taking pictures in a craft rich with history. The square rigger carries 10,000 square feet of sail, and the mainmast measures over 100 feet. Above and below deck, the Bounty is trim and taut, ready to go forth to the rolling deep. All are invited to roam where mighty men have labored and lived. Look at the galley, brought back to its original condition with all the equipment and provisions and stores of nearly 200 years ago. The Bounty is no longer a ghost ship of another era. It is living history as it sails Tampa Bay, yearning for the wonder of the sea, its rigging creaking in a mild tropic breeze, and her topsail shot with fire. Here you've seen portrayed 5 of St. Petersburg's many attractions, only a portion of Florida's great golden magnet of sunshine, St. Pete. With much to see, much to do. Come to St. Petersburg. We look forward to having you.
And there you have it, directly from 1965. We should point out that William Bligh was not a pirate. A lot of things that weren't true in there. But if you just joined this, we're talking about vintage St. Pete, the golden age of tourism, and more. And my name is Bill DeYoung, and that's Monica from Heritage Village over there. And there she goes. So I thought what we do is I just kind of take you through the book a little bit. We're very, very excited about the book coming out. The first section, there are 4 sections. The first section, as we said, is about tourist attractions. Now, this is the Aquatarium, which opened in 1964 and was closed in 1978. And raised for condominiums not long after that. This is right on St. Pete Beach. A lot of folks will very fondly remember this from the golden age of Flipper on TV, and when people started going completely nuts, realizing that bottlenose dolphins were not only cute, they were very, very intelligent and could do tricks. And so that's essentially what this was, the forerunner to SeaWorld. And you see there were 2 tanks. I like this aerial shot a lot. This is from the book. The book looks like this. This is the first page of the Aquatarium story. Essentially what I did was I went back and learned about how and why and who put this together. I thought that these things we might want to just have all these in one place. Interesting thing about the Aquatarium, though, you saw there in the film they had a short fin pilot whale, black whale with a big bulbous head. These things do notoriously not very well in captivity. In fact, that whale was a female named Jonah, interestingly enough, and it died within 2 years of its arrival at the Aquatarium, and they never replaced it because you shouldn't keep deep sea mammals, which the pilot whale is, in a 25, 30-foot deep tank. Bad idea. Animal husbandry kind of was on my mind as I was reading and learning about bottlenose dolphins in captivity. They called them porpoises back then. It was an unenlightened time. So I started thinking about that and remembering that even earlier, when I was a very small kid, I'd gone to another place that had a leaping dolphin. And I did a little bit of research. It was very difficult to find out about a place called the Johns Pass Aquarium. The Johns Pass Aquarium began life in 1953 as the Marine Arena, right there on by the Johns Pass Bridge. Jack Hurlbut ran a bait shop out there, and he was very, very taken with Marineland over there near St. Augustine, which was the first place in the world you could watch porpoises jump out of the water. He was very taken with that. He was a profoundly good fisherman and very interested in marine life. Of course, dolphins, or porpoises as they called them then, were just considered another fish. What Jack Hurlbut did was he built a big concrete tank and a lot across from his bait shop, and it was called the Marine Arena. He was so infatuated with Marineland. His early sketches, which I've seen, look just like a little miniature Marineland. The tank was between 10 and 12 feet deep, about 40, 50 feet across, and maybe 30 the other way. And he captured bottlenose dolphins and kept them in there and trained them himself. This place lasted, folks, until 1967. Had to do a lot of research to find out about it. There's a flyer. There's Jack with Paddy the porpoise. That's P-A-D-D-Y. We're going to talk about that for a minute. Look at that place. No sunlight got in there. You can picture little Billy DeYoung and his friends sitting over there with the folks watching this thing. Poor Paddy was in this little tank with no sunlight for 9 years. The aquarium finally closed this place down because it was just kind of too small. It was kind of like going into a big aquarium in the back of a bait shop, frankly. This is what it looked like. This is right down there on Johns Pass. The Hurlbut family lived in the apartment over the gift shop. The left part of your screen there, that was the tank where Paddy played. In the early days, I found all kinds of newspaper clippings where Hurlbut was soliciting for porpoises for his tank. Again, nobody knew any better in those days, but he paid local fishermen $100 a piece for porpoises for the tank, and he went through several of them. They either got sick or they died. He had to have the police come in and shoot one. It's an incredible story. And then he finally got Paddy, who was trapped by the great what's his name? Captain Wilson Hubbard. It wasn't coming to me, sorry, Maureen. By Captain Wilson Hubbard, who had a dolphin in a pen, and he sold it to Hurlbut. The dolphin's name was Paddy, named after one of his daughters, P-A-T-T-Y. Well, Hurlbut says, hey, this is a male. They named it Paddy with 2 D's, and it became the permanent resident for the last 9 years in the Marine Arena. It's really looking back on it now with the knowledge that we have about the shame that comes on people who keep marine animals in captivity. It's shameful to read, but it's a fascinating chapter in our history. He sold Paddy to the aquarium when he had to close, and Paddy died at the aquarium a year later. Here's Marine Arena now. This is Wild Style Swimwear out there on Johns Pass. This is the actual building. You can see the apartment there, and if you go inside this place into Wild Style Swimwear, as I have, purely for research, you understand, the walls, behind the paneling on the walls, you can still find Jack Hurlbut's concrete tank. And this is part of our heritage, our tourism heritage in St. Petersburg. Let's take a stroll through a couple more pages of the book. The London Wax Museum opened in 1963. One of the first exhibits was JFK and his lovely bride, with a very strange looking John Glenn on the left there. Kennedy, of course, was murdered in November of that year, and they replaced this odd looking tableau with this one. Now, a reviewer said that Lee Harvey Oswald, in this wax recreation of his murder, looks like he's about to break into a song and dance routine. It was very spooky, though, when you were a kid. The Wax Museum, this is a page from the book which shows you the Cleopatra tableau in her bubble bath. The water was actually moving and bubbling. And another moving tableau, which was the deathbed of Abraham Lincoln, and his chest rose as he was breathing, and almost imperceptibly. And as a kid, it was very spooky. We'll talk about the Chamber of Horrors another time. That was something else. The London Wax Museum was open until the mid-'80s, when it just frankly wasn't cool anymore. In the story, we get to learn about Ted Stambaugh, who was the owner and manager of the Wax Museum, and the sort of wacky promotional stunts he pulled and how he got the various wax figures and what he did with them and how he survived, how the place survived all the way into the 80s. There's the first page of the one on Sunken Gardens. It kind of explains itself. Tiki Gardens. John Bortles, I hope you're watching tonight. The Tiki Gardens story looks pretty good. John's a Tiki Gardens aficionado and a friend of mine who helped me a lot with the research. The photographs in this book, a great deal of them are actually postcards, which fall into public domain after a certain amount of time. There are a lot of things which we're going to show when we get to the historical section that weren't postcards. But for things like this, there's the HMS Bounty. The one on the right, obviously, is a postcard of the Bounty moored down alongside the old St. Pete Pier. On the left, some of the kids whose parents and family members worked on the ship. That was one of the great pleasures of doing the story about the Bounty, was talking to people, some of them a little younger than myself, who literally grew up on that ship. It was here for a long time. And of course, the tragic story of what happened to the Bounty is recounted in this book too, but they all tell their stories in here. And it's a kind of a behind the scenes look at what it was like to live in this town and work, you know, serving the tourist trade, as it were, in St. Pete in those days. There are quite a bit of historical stories that kind of go outside the tourist attraction model and also kind of aren't really baby boomer stories. They're kind of universal. That's why it's called the Golden Age of Tourism and More. One of my favorite stories to work on was this one about the famous Manhattan Casino down in the Deuces on the south side, where between 1938, I think it was, and 1964, many of the greats of R&B and soul and jazz music performed. This was the hip black club down there in that part of the city, and everybody who was anybody, from James Brown to Ella Fitzgerald. Ray Charles was there every year. Sam Cooke, you see him there in the Soul Stirrers in that picture, was there every year for 5 years in the 50s. James Brown, one of his very first shows outside of Georgia in 1956, I think it was, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. It was a pleasure to work on that story. Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio had been divorced for about 7 years when they vacationed together at the Tides Motor Lodge out in Reddington in 1961. A lot of folks remembered this. A lot of folks had no idea that this had happened when we published the story, but they were fairly public. They ate dinner out pretty much every night. They sat on the beach. Joe signed baseballs for kids. They ate in the restaurant. I spoke to several people who worked there, who are obviously, you know, adults now, but as teenagers they worked there. And they told me their stories about that, which was absolutely amazing. I had been thinking about when the Melting Pot restaurant closed on 4th Street, that when I was young, my parents used to go there when it was a French restaurant called Roland et Pierre, Roland and Pierre. When I found out from our good friend Chris Steinecker, was that before it was Roland Pierre, it was called the Earl Gresh Wood Parade. Earl Gresh was a big band leader in the 20s who actually led a band out at the Gangplank, which is the old Jungle Prada out on Park Street, which is also in this book. But when he stopped doing that, his wife basically said, "You got to stop touring around. I need you to stay at home." He was a wood carver also. When that happened, he turned this into his profession and became one of the most famous wood carvers. Carvers of fishing lures, of fishing tackle boxes, of huge tableaus. He worked with soft woods. He was an amazing wood carver. He built the facility, which became the Earl Gresh Wood Parade, which was a museum, and his shop, his workshop, and a gift shop, obviously. And all those buildings are still there. This is a bust that Mr. Gresh did of himself. They have this at the Museum of History here. This is a combination of going back and looking at newspaper clippings. When you know the sort of date range, you can go back and look, and recreating as a narrative what happened from various years of these people's lives. Also other things that have been published. It's a whole kind of amalgam of sources bringing these things together to tell a story. I have no idea what's next. Let's see. Okay. So I discovered the St. Petersburg operetta. This was in 1951 through 1953, the very first time that musical theater ever came to St. Petersburg, ever, other than the community theaters. It was done in a big top circus tent on 4th Street and I think it was 92nd Avenue. For 3 seasons, Broadway people came down and put on seasons of shows. I discovered a gentleman named Curtis Graham, whose father was Phil Graham, who was their official photographer. He had this box of photographs and Curtis didn't really even know what they were. But I found Curtis and said, do you have a bunch of photographs of people doing song and dance routines in a tent? And he said, why, yes, I do. And so we were able to work with Curtis and get some of his dad's photographs. And through this sort of archaeology, journalistic archaeology, I wrote a story about the operetta and its Treasure Island counterpart, the Treasure Island Music Circus. You got to read the book to find out about that. But these are other photos from the operetta story. And if you see down below here on the right, the operetta in its last 2 seasons was out of the tent because the tent blew over in a big wind, and that was embarrassing. It moved into what became the Gay Blades roller rink. There's also a story in here about Gay Blades, which was a recreation center for children between the 50s and the 80s. There's a huge story about Gay Blades here. I got to speak to so many people who had great memories of this place. And my sister used to skate there, and I remember it. I don't think I ever did. I usually fell down on roller skates. So after the operetta moved out, Gay Blades took it over. That Quonset hut you saw in that other photograph. And so Gay Blades is in here too. And this is a real trip down memory lane, and it was fun to write. And I think it's fun to read too. There is a complete history of the St. Petersburg Pier with photos of all of the different ones over the years. There's a profile of Dick Bannock, who we all knew and loved as Dr. Paul Bearer, who hosted Creature Feature on WTOG Channel 44 for 22 years. Dr. Paul Bearer is the longest running TV horror movie host in history. And kudos to my friend Doug for suggesting that I work on this one. I talked to Dick's widow, he's gone now. All about him, got some amazing photographs together. This is 2 of the pages from the book on the story on Dr. Paul Bearer. There's a little section about movies that were made here. This is the Robert Altman film Health that was done at the Don Cesar in 1979. You probably never heard of it because it was so bad that it never went into a wide release, despite having a cast that includes James Garner and Lauren Bacall and Carol Burnett. Dick Cavett in it. Oh, there's a selling point for you. Anyway, my friend Roy Peter Clark, as a reporter for the Times, actually covered the making of this film. And so I got to chat with Roy about it. And other than the fact that he had a big crush on Lauren Bacall, who was still like pretty great looking in those days, he said he could already tell that it was going to be pretty awful. You can see it on YouTube if you dare. You may remember the Suncoast Seabird Sanctuary. Ralph Heath is a brilliant man, and I interned with him for a summer right out of high school and learned so much from Ralph. Absolutely brilliant man. He started the Suncoast Seabird Sanctuary in the early 70s and lost it just a few years ago. There's a big, sad story as to what happened here, which I won't go into. Kind of a sad downfall of a once great gentleman. And as the Seacoast Seabird Sanctuary, it still exists, and they're doing great work out there. Ralph's no longer associated with them. But again, you got to read this to find out more about the man they called the Birdman of Florida. Finally, this is a photo from Cocoon, Rod Howard's movie that came out in '85, which was filmed almost entirely in St. Petersburg. This is a swimming pool that still exists in one of the mansions on Park Street. The filmmakers, Ron Howard and his team, built the pool house over it for these 3 old guys to swim in. So there are a lot of stories that don't have to do with tourist attractions, but it's just a segment of St. Petersburg history that wasn't in the history books. So that's why I did that. There's a story, speaking of movies, and I wanted to mention this one, about the Sun Haven Studios, where they made 3 early talkies in 1931. Sun Haven Studios was on Weeden Island. Yeah, there was actually a movie studio out there, and this was totally new to me, way before the baby boomers, but it was such a great story. I wanted to find out about it, and I did, and find out about all 3 movies, which are all really, really bad, by the way. So here's the table of contents. The stories are on Sunken Gardens, on Web City. A lot of stuff in there. Thank you to the Museum of History for loaning us some great photos. The Marine Arena, Johns Pass Aquarium, Tiki Gardens, the Aquatarium, the London Wax Museum, MGM's Bounty, the Earl Gresh Wood Parade, the Pier, Boyd Hill Nature Trail, the Suncoast Seabird Sanctuary, Fort DeSoto. Did you know Henry Fonda was here in '62 and figuratively broke the champagne bottle on the Fort DeSoto Park? I remembered as a kid riding these little trains around in the woods, and nobody I knew had any memory of that until I started discovering postcards with pictures of trains. And that, of course, makes you dig deeper. And reading the Times coverage of opening day of all these things was just mind-blowing. And I learned so much too. There's a whole history of the Bayfront Center, which is, of course, gone now, which opened in May of '65. The Mojave Theater, of course, is still there. That was part of the Bayfront Center. Dr. Paul Bear's Uncle Seabird Sanctuary, the Manhattan Casino, Gabe Lead's Sunhaven Health, and Cocoon. And I think I forgot one or two. There are 22 chapters in the book. And I'm trying to figure out what my time is looking like here. Pretty good. That's the cover. What can I tell you? Our book is colorful. It's funny, I think, in places. It's got a hardback cover. It's a nice kind of coffee table book, a little bit smaller than a coffee table book, but bigger than your sort of general deal. It's just gone to the printers, and we are in the process of taking pre-orders right now. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it. And I'm gonna come back to Monica now and kind of see where we are. Hey.
Hi, that was great. Wow.
You want to buy a book? Can I sell you a book or what?
I do. I think we definitely need to have one for our archives and library.
Yeah, let's make that happen. Yeah, for sure.
I truly, the Wax Museum is terrifying.
Oh my gosh. Here, I'll tell you something really funny about the Wax Museum. As kids, we all remembered the one with Oswald getting shot and with Jack Ruby and the gun and all that stuff. And so as an adult visiting St. Petersburg in the '80s, I came down with a friend of mine who remembered it too, who didn't live here anymore, and a girlfriend, and said, "Oh, we got to find the Jack Ruby shooting thing." Well, the Wax Museum was kind of run down by then. This was probably 1984, about a year before it closed. And what I did, and it wasn't there. So, okay, oh, bummer. We went down to the Chamber of Horrors, which had, heads on hooks and all kinds of guillotines, only to discover that they had repurposed all three of those figures, put different clothes on Oswald and Ruby and the Texas Ranger, and put, for example, when you split the switch for the electric chair and get all creeped out, the guy in the chair was Oswald doubled over like this. And we started laughing. And then we found Ruby in another one, different clothes. He's back all hunched over. That's him. And so where my friend Bill and I are going, where's the Texas Ranger? Where's that tall guy with the shocked look on his face? And he was in something else. It was like the last one. Oh, he's not here.
Found him.
Died laughing. I mean, he fell on the floor. And then a year later, the whole thing was gone. But
which is hilarious that you say that, because it does honestly look in the Wax Museum like he's doing like a dance.
Yeah,
he doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a journey of discovery for me, and sort of putting memories in a place. And I feel like I like to be kind of organized, especially with things I remember. And I don't like not remembering things correctly. It's like, what really happened there? So that's it. And it looks really good. I think I went to the printer today. You'd have to ask Amy from St. Petersburg Press, but we got it in just under the deadline, hopefully to get it in around holiday time.
Well, that's fantastic. It will be a great book for a holiday present. And I would like to know if anybody has any questions from the audience for Bill. If you do, go ahead and type them in that Q&A box, and we'll read off the questions. And I mean, there was a lot of good stuff to look at. I'm sure a lot of things that people remembered. I know in the comments.
Blades, do you remember that? One of the most fun experiences I had in this process was talking with people who had really vivid and very, very fond memories of some of these places. Some of the the folks who had as children skated at gay blades and shared photographs with me. My family, we were all speed skaters and we all did it together. And those people were so nice and so wonderful. And I remember Camilla Mosley, hi Camilla, if you're watching, who told me that the big thing to do at Gay Blades, which is right up the street from St. Petersburg High School, on Friday nights when all the kids would be skating, the big thing to do would be to be the first one to burst through the door and come find Mrs. Gould, who was the announcer, and tell her the score of the St. Pete High football game that night. If you were the first person, she would say your name, and thank you to Camilla Mosley. And that was a big thing when you were a kid. So, and literally it was 4 blocks. As soon as the game was over, run up the street. I loved hearing things like that. I loved hearing Dr. Paul Bearer's wife telling me that in the hotel lobby, he wasn't in costume, and they were in a hotel lobby, and somebody walked up next to him and said, "You're Dr. Paul Bearer?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And he says, "You have a glass eye, don't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, see?" And he took it out. That's the kind of guy he was. That's why he looks so strange, so odd in photographs.
Okay, yeah, because I was just, he does look strange, and I always just thought it was his makeup.
No, before the camera was on, he would turn it. He would turn the eye so that way. And he had a problem with the other eye that was kind of bulging. So he had this one like bulging, really funny guy, bulging on this one that he would turn so that it was looking the other way, the fake one. And yeah, made a career.
So I have a couple of questions and a comment. One from Susan. She says, my folks would go down to Wolfie's in downtown St. Pete and bring home the cheese ring Danish circa 60s. Love that.
I'll go you one better. That was in Central Plaza, and William Henry was the big department store at the end of Central Plaza. Now, Roy Adams, hi Roy, we've talked about this all the time. I love talking with hometown folks about these things. William Henry is where my mother, I was a kid, would drag me to buy clothes. It was this huge department store, and it was near Wolfie's. It had the best record department in St. Petersburg. And I'm a music person and a record geek, even as a kid. And so I could, when mom would let me kind of sneak off, I'd be there. I loved going to William Henry. Wolfie's was fabulous. Oh my God, I should do a series. I've done some things in restaurants. We did the Chataway and Munchies and Coney Island. I did a whole thing with Ted Peters, Smoked Fish. None of those are in the book because they're kind of about businesses, but I think Wolfie's should be on that list. And thanks for that, Susan.
Debbie wants to know, how long did you work at the Times, Bill?
I never really worked at the Times. When you're a correspondent, really with that, it's a polite way of saying you write for them, but you don't work there. In other words, I got out of Gibbs High School and at 16 or 17, started writing concert reviews for them. And it was really because when you'd review concerts in those days, you'd either go to the Bayfront Center, over to Curtis Sexton Hall in Tampa, or in the late 70s, the Lakeland Civic Center. It's all concrete boxes, folks. But I used to get the Lakeland Civic Center gigs because the critic from the Times didn't want to drive all the way out there. Let's let the kid do it. So that's how I got my first bylines, and I started writing feature stories. And so it was about maybe, I'm going to age myself here, it was maybe 77 through 80. And in 81, I moved to Gainesville to go to school.
So people didn't want to make the drive from the Tampa Bay area to Lakeland even back then?
Oh no, it's very simple. Nobody wanted to drive to Curtis Sexton Hall except they had the really cool concerts. Some of the, the first things I did was those concert reviews. I think in Lakeland Civic Center, I saw Earth, Wind and Fire when they were cool, and they would come down in literally in the spaceship. I saw Queen out there right after Bohemian Rhapsody, and Thin Lizzy opened. I mean, I saw some great shows. The Bayfront Center, I saw some not so great shows. I saw Ted Nugent, which I'm still trying to forget. and I'm 18 or whatever, and I wrote a really nasty review saying this is all just a bunch of punching around. And Ted Nugent's mother, who was prone to do this in those days, read the review and sent me a nasty letter through the Times.
Oh, that's a cool letter to hold on to.
I wish I had it. And it said, she sent me a little Ted button that said, Ted Nugent, if he's too loud, you're too old. And I was 18 at the time, and I knew I wasn't too old. Yeah.
Mary wants to know, did you ever review a Rush show?
I never had the pleasure of seeing Rush. I was never a huge fan until later. And that right before Neil died, I saw that wonderful documentary, I guess on Netflix. And over the last few years, came into a really great appreciation of that band. But no, I never did see them.
John Bortles, your friend, says, do a restaurant book, K-pop Tree and both of them.
I remember John mentioning the K-pop Tree. That's definitely on the list. Definitely on the list. And a friend of mine says that there was a second K-pop Tree. We might have talked about this, John, out on maybe Madeira Beach or something. So that's definitely, it's a Sam Ash music store now. You can still walk around inside of there and see all the grandeur, the gold gilt and all that stuff. Anything else?
Yeah, Debbie wants to know, have you ever done other books on St. Pete history? She's particularly interested in the old history during the land boom and crash.
That I haven't. Most recently, I did a story for a vintage story about Tony Janus and the first ticketed air passenger, which was in 1914, if I'm not mistaken. And they're about to put up a really substantial monument. It's 40 feet wide, life size of the biplane on the St. Pete Pier. The great Mark Ailing has sculpted that. And so I did a story that, and I think that's the oldest thing I've done. And I haven't gotten into this sort of land boom stuff, other than the fact really that the Weeden Island studio was a product of that. And the land boom was pretty much over, but I think what happened was that, I think his name was Arthur Kennedy, the guy that bought that property in Weeden Island, got it dirt cheap because everything was dirt cheap then. I wrote a book about the tragedy that knocked down the Sunshine Skyway Bridge in 1980, and also a book about the most famous record producer from Florida, who happened to be from St. Petersburg, whose name is Phil Gernhardt. But yeah, Boyd Hill Nature Trail, it really, I gotta say, I mean, for me, it was just, I remember that place. Why can't I find anything out about it? And then it's like doing detective work. And when you're a writer, the more you find out, the more kind of primed you get for finding out more and adding to the narrative and then putting it in my own voice. And then suddenly, if anybody wants to read about Boyd Hill Nature Trail, I found a lot of people who remembered it fondly. It took me a while. In other words, there's something now for them to read. That's why I did the Skyway book too, which is really, none of it was all in one place, and it all disagreed with each other in different places. And history, it was becoming ancient history, and time was passing. And I thought, well, let's see if we can't put it all together in a solid single place. And yeah, so that's why you do this.
And I'm sure going out to do some of this research and interfacing with just the most interesting people and getting to go kind of behind the scenes in some of our great museums here in St. Petersburg kind of makes you even that much more curious to find out a little bit more about St. Pete.
Well, I'll tell you what, tomorrow morning, I'm going to the Dali Museum to take the media tour of the Vincent van Gogh exhibition that's open.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that looks great.
It's like a multimedia immersive thing. You walk into these giant, this is how I understand it. But I'm excited about that. So when you say, yeah, behind the scenes, not only do I get to go and not have to pay the money, sorry, Hank, but I get to go before the public does. Like,
the perks of an author.
Yeah. Well, that's what I do at the Catalyst. Writing the vintage series is just kind of a part of it. I mean, I'm essentially the arts editor, and I cover the arts community here in Tampa Bay. And it's just so vibrant and so wonderful. And as you say, I meet great, wonderful people, and all of whom are very dedicated to keeping this place special and making it even more so. And it's a thrill to live and work on the periphery of that. It really is.
Well, we have one more question for you, Bill. Did you ever go to St. Pete AAA or AA hockey team games at a Bayfront?
Here to confess that I'm not a sports guy. And I never saw basketball. There's a great photo of a USF basketball game inside the Bayfront Center. And here there's a great photo of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, which was there every January. There are photos, not in this book, but obviously of hockey, and the Rowdies played in there for a while. But confessing, I'm not a sports guy. No, never saw anything there. I ice skated in there a couple of times, fell on my butt like we all did, but afraid I didn't. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more, a very important question that you will probably want to answer. How do people order this book?
Ah, funny you should ask. First of all, there's a Facebook page for Vintage St. Pete, the Golden Age of Tourism and more. If you look it up, just type that in. If you like that page, you know, the little like button, you'll get updates. And I'm literally finding this out as we go along. As I say, it just went to the printer today. And the hope is that it will be ready by Christmas. Why I'm telling you this is that it'll be available for pre-order. I believe it's $25. It'll be available for pre-order very soon, as soon as we know what the parameters are, and that'll go up on that Facebook page immediately. The pre-orders, I'm reasonably certain, are, and I'll get corrected by somebody if this is wrong, will go through stpetepress.com, which is the publisher, very soon. And thanks for asking. And I hope you like it. I know you'll like it. It's cool. Just the picture.
It looks great. I can't wait to go leaf through it. And I find that you're right. You know, you get a lot of like probably more academic books on the history of St. Pete. And yeah, sometimes you're getting the same information, and it does. There seems to be a hole. So I can't wait to learn about some of these more obscure places that really kind of look to, as you said, the tourism aspect of St. Pete.
The fun side of life, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting, you know how it is, Mike. I mean, it's very interesting to find out how the city was plotted and how the waterfront parks were planned and the great vision that some of these guys had in those days. And I do like reading about, you know, when the trolleys ran, and, you know, it's fabulous stuff. This felt like this was more maybe to a different generation of people who, you know, lived here and maybe used to live here or just moved here and want to know kind of like, what was it like? What did you do for fun, you know, in those days? And that's kind of what this is.
Well, I know that from our end, what we will do is definitely put out posts on when the book is coming out on our Heritage Village Facebook page. So if you're not already a friend or following the Heritage Village Facebook page, that's a great place to find out more information about Bill's book coming out very soon. And thank you so much, Bill DeYoung. That was a lot of fun to go through and journey back. So again, thank you so much for being with us.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.